Hello everybody, this is Bhante Joe here, and I'm just here outside of one of the kuttis. This is up a short hill, and they've built this kind of meditation platform on the hill. So just thought to record a short Dhamma discussion for the internet. So I thought that maybe you could start with a little bit of meditation, so you can lean forward a bit and arch the spine, and look about 3 feet in front, and close our eyes. And can focus in on the breath. Can know when it's coming in and know when it's going out. If we breathe in a long breath, can just know I'm breathing in a long breath. And if we breathe in a short breath, can just know I'm breathing in a short breath. And can focus in on the breath at the tip of the nose. And when breathing in and out from the tip of the nose, can try to make awareness as continuous as possible, being aware all the way through the in-breath. As the in-breath turns to the out-breath, all the way through the out-breath, and as the out-breath turns back to the in-breath again. Trying to make mindfulness as continuous as possible. And if the mind wanders off to the past or the future, can just gently bring it back to the present moment, to the breath. And before we finish meditating, can spread thoughts of goodwill, wishing may all beings all around everywhere be happy and at ease. May they put in place the causes necessary to be happy and at ease. And we can make our mind infinite, can make it unbounded, all the way to the ends of the universe and beyond, in every dimension. May all beings all around everywhere be happy and at ease. And can open our eyes and do a short Dhamma discussion for the internet. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dhammaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi. Dutiyampi Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Dhammaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi. So hello everybody, and hope that everybody's having a great day wherever it might be. And so I was asked this question by suttas.com, which was how do we practice mudita, or kind of empathetic joy, when people are kind of jealous and envious, I guess, towards us. And so, these days in societies are mostly based around kind of like competition. So people compete with one another for scarce resources. People kind of compete, as children for the best marks, as adults for the best jobs, and university for the best grades. And everything is seen to be kind of, not everything maybe, but many things are seen to be kind of up for grabs for ideally the most talented person, the person who's able to outcompete their peers and emerge on top of them. And when a person kind of grows up in a modern society like this, then empathetic joy can be something very difficult to cultivate. And one might feel that one doesn't see other people showing a lot of empathetic joy towards one. It's because, or one of the main reasons possibly, is because from a young age people are trained to compete, and society is about competition. So one of the things about this society being in this way, I mean, it's good in a way, of course, because it ideally allows for the people with the most talent to rise to the top, rather than people rising to the top based on their social connections or their birth status or anything like this, which has been the case in some ancient societies. But the unfortunate thing about this is that it can be a block towards empathetic joy. So one of the things that one can do in one's own mind in practicing empathetic joy in a competitive society is to kind of remind oneself that basically if one was in a situation where everybody was doing worse than one was, then it would be difficult for somebody to really do well. If a person's in a situation where everybody around one is doing really well, then it becomes much easier for one to do well. So for example, if one goes and lives in a country in the middle of a civil war, or in the middle of a famine, or in the middle of a plague, and one doesn't have, hasn't been kind of drafted into the war, or has enough food, or hasn't caught the plague, then in that situation one would be doing better than everybody. But still, living in a situation like that would be pretty unpleasant. If one was in the middle of a war zone, if one hadn't been drafted for the war, wasn't involved immediately, likely there would be a greater possibility that one would eventually be sucked into war and one could come into danger. If one was in a situation where there's a famine, if one had enough food, it's not likely going to be the type of really great, delicious food in a place where everybody has enough to eat, that there would be in a place where everybody has an abundance of food to eat. And similarly, if one is in a place with a disease, then one doesn't have it yet, everybody else is doing worse than one, then likely one will catch it. And so this is the Buddha's teachings on kind of association with good people, or association with other people, is that whatever situation a person's in, one tends to take on the qualities of those people. So one can remind oneself that at the very least, if one is in a situation where people around one are doing really well, or other people are doing really well, or one's in a society that's generally doing well, although it may be competitive, this actually gives one the best opportunity to do well oneself. And this is not to say do well, get the best job or anything like that, but in general, if one is living in a place that's prosperous, has enough food, all these various things, one's likelihood of getting enough food is going to be very great. So when other people are envious and jealous towards one, then one can also remind oneself that that basically this is their kind of karma, usually people are envious and jealous towards a person when they're doing worse than that person is. It doesn't usually, I mean, it can definitely happen when people are doing better than another person, that they could become envious and jealous towards them if they start to gain in skills or gain in status or whatever it might be. But even still in that situation, what one can do, if the person is doing better than one, remind oneself that this is an opportunity. If I'm around people who are doing better than me, then I can learn from what they're doing. I can observe from what they're doing. And I can see about that. Even if they have this negative jealousy or whatever towards oneself, one can still have that. This is one of the things that one can do in cultivating empathetic joy, is recognizing that being in a situation where everybody's doing well, even if people are jealous, is a situation that will allow one to do well oneself. And so one can be happy that for the success of others. Another strategy for developing empathetic joy in a kind of competitive society is that, amazingly enough, even in really competitive societies, there's this ancient model where people go up to one another or go up to people who are doing better and ask them how they're doing better. How did you do that? How is it that you're doing well? So in the canon, it said that if somebody is skilled at kind of wisdom, then they should go and ask somebody who's skilled at concentration. How did you do that? How did you become skilled at concentration? If somebody's skilled at concentration, they should go and ask somebody, how did you do that? How did you become skilled at wisdom? Go and ask somebody who's skilled at wisdom. And in this way, that person will explain to them how to do, and they can raise their level. I remember one time when I was kind of a younger monk than I am now. I was living in Thailand, and the kind of young monks kind of compete with each other sometimes, kind of unofficially. Kind of, try to do like the most meditation and kind of these things that young men do. And there was one monk there who was really impressive, kind of like basically head and shoulders above the rest of us in many things. And one of the things that really impressed me about him was that he always seemed to be putting forth effort. He kind of, I used to read like these kind of novels, or like, not novels, but what you call nonfiction books a lot. Really into history and these things. And sometimes I would schedule time in my day for like a break where I would read some history. And I noticed he would never do that. He was always developing a skill of some sort. And so at first I thought, well, kind of the natural urge was to kind of compete. But eventually, realized he was head and shoulders above me. So no need to, I learned. I thought about that Buddhist phrase, you go and ask that person if they're better than you at concentration, how are you doing that? And so I went and asked him. And the answer that he gave me really helped to fill in a gap in the way that I was kind of putting forth effort. Kind of the answer and also his example, something about what he said kind of clicked or made a lot of sense. When just kind of noticing the way he did things, he would put forth effort all the time, but then he would talk to people. But what I would do is make this kind of schedule up, and anything that got into my schedule, I would brush it away. So I'd kind of be brushing away relationships with people. So what he did whenever he would not be engaged with another person is he would be putting forth effort in something. But if there's some kind of situation came up where he had to be engaged with another person, he would do that. And trying to follow his example in that way seemed to make my attempts to put forth effort a lot more balanced, a lot better. And so it was a great benefit to be around somebody who knew more, who was better than me at that quality. And so this is something even in a competitive society that might be something instinctual, that when one goes and asks somebody who's doing better than oneself, how do you do that? And then gives them respect for sharing their knowledge, then this is something that kind of flips the dynamic on its head. And even in a competitive society, it's surprising how often people will share their knowledge when one goes and humbly asks them. So in this way, being around people who are better than oneself is a good thing. Something that one can benefit from, something that one can raise one's skill up. And so the Buddha says, look for people who are more skilled than you in the Dhamma. If you associate with somebody who's more skilled than you, then you'll grow quickly in the Dhamma. If you associate with somebody who's worse, then you'll become worse. And so don't associate with somebody who's worse, other than out of compassion. And so kind of like a teacher is obviously better than their student. So what we want is to find people who are better than us. Ideally, if one is a Buddhist practitioner and was living in a place where everybody was an arahant, then it's much more likely that one would become an arahant oneself. This would be kind of an ideal situation. This is kind of things that one can keep in mind to allay one's jealousy. And then one can also spread this kind of thoughts of mudita, having this as a meditation object in one's practice. And so in addition to this rational part, this portion of practicing this meditation method frequently, often, for longer periods of time, that's what actually goes to eliminate jealousy. One is wishing other people well. And what one might find as one does this is that one's focus tends to shift. One stops seeing other people as kind of competitors who are necessarily separate from oneself. One starts to see a kind of a bit more of an intertwined unity between people and beings. Not to say that this is some metaphysical truth. This just becomes a perception, or can become a perception that one has. I mean, we're all intertwined. If he does well, I do well. If he does worse, I do worse. I hope he does well. It's the same thing, or it helps to lift me up for all the reasons, that just mentioned before. At least for those reasons, at least, probably many more. And so, in addition, though, in a competitive society, when one is wishing empathetic joy for other people, it also requires a person to have an element of wisdom. Because if people are competing with one and wish one to do poorly, then one has to gauge the extent to which one will try to help them. If they have evil designs towards oneself, then helping them may hurt oneself. And so one has to have this element of wisdom. So for example, if somebody is working on a project at work and has been doing a lot of meditation practice, wishing everybody well, and they know there's somebody who wants to compete with them, and that person, for various reasons keeps coming up to one, asking one how they're doing this project or whatever it might be, then it might be wise to guard that knowledge to a certain extent. This is something where one has to use one's element of wisdom. Maybe once the project is complete, one can test that person out a bit. If they really want to learn and are really sincere, then one can test them out in small ways. So I remember reading the biography of Steve Jobs and also watching this film about Silicon Valley. And originally it was kind of Xerox who developed this kind of, now computers is just, everybody uses this kind of clicking thing. Even smartphones, it's graphics that people interact with. But for myself, I'm old enough to remember when computers were mainly this typing thing that people did. You would kind of type into this disk operating system, and in DOS usually, and Linux was not so popular then, and either was Mac, and you would mainly interact with your computer from that. It wasn't like a point and click thing. That came out later and was super popular. But the first people to develop that were apparently Xerox. They had this kind of thing in their lab. They were the first people to come up with it. And the company didn't see much value in it, so they sold it to, I can't remember who, but they allowed both Apple and I think Microsoft to see that. And that's where Apple and Microsoft went in and kind of took that technology and made their own, billions or whatever it was. So in that case, in a case like that, practically speaking, if one senses that one has evil intentions towards oneself, one wants to guard. One wants to guard things. This is where this element of wisdom comes in. If one senses that people are jealous towards oneself, one doesn't have to have jealousy towards them. Oh, may they not do well. But at the same time, one can guard one's hard work. And this is why Buddhism is a wisdom tradition. So this is one of the ways, it's not so easy to say in every situation exactly how to do it, because it requires a mix. It requires an adjustment depending on the factors of the situation, depending on how the person appears, depending on what one is guarding. If one is guarding a candy bar, no big deal. If one is guarding one's house, then maybe a bigger deal. But in any event, one doesn't want jealousy to arise in one's mind in any case whatsoever. Even if somebody kind of cheats or swindles one, we don't want to develop empathetic joy. Somebody kind of is cheating and swindling you, or one's own self. In that case, we would develop compassion. May this person not suffer. May they see the error of their ways, because stealing from somebody is going to bring them a lot of misfortune. That's one of the things that one can do. So in these ways, one can work to develop freedom from jealousy. One can work to develop empathetic joy in a competitive society by recognizing that being in a situation where other people are doing well, even if they're kind of competing or whatever, maybe it's not as good as if everybody were sharing, but if everybody's doing well, then that's good. If one's in that situation, it makes it much more likely that one will do well oneself. If one is around people who are doing much better than oneself, then one can go and ask them, how are you doing this? And it's surprising how often they'll share, especially if one's intentions are pure. But then if other people are jealous towards one, actively trying to harm one, then one wants to set up a guard, kind of set up a guard so that whatever they're trying to do to harm one, one doesn't allow them to do. But at the same time, not allowing jealousy towards them to arise in one's mind. If they do well, then wishing them well, wishing them success. But wishing them the kind of success that comes when people do things honestly, do things in a way that will bring them long-term happiness. And if they're doing things in a way that will bring them short-term happiness but long-term pain by cheating, threatening, or whatever it might be out of jealousy, then one has compassion for them. And metta, spreading goodwill to them. May this person find the path to true happiness. In this way, one can work towards eliminating jealousy from one's mind. And probably the most important component of all is to actually practice this. Practice it by practicing the Brahma-Vihara, by spreading empathetic joy in all directions, making this a frequent habit, making it something that one does often, can do for long periods of time, so that it becomes a basis in one's mind, so that it becomes firm in one's mind that one is not jealous, that whenever somebody else does well, grows in the Dhamma, grows in wholesome qualities, one will be happy for them, one will be glad. And this makes one's world bright. This makes one's world more easeful, because one then isn't limited to just one's own joy. One can take joy in the joy of others, which is a great thing. Okay, so I think leave that for reflection, and hope that everybody has a great day wherever it might be, and wishing you all the best till next time.